All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. It's Millennial Trades. It's Friday the 13th, 2023. I guess I didn't even really realize it was Friday the 13th until after I was trading. Got kind of caught up in the chop, still ended up green on the day. We'll talk about that at the end of the video. Markets across the board, though, up a little bit, not substantially. Amazon had a great day, up about 3%. Amazon's really has been the stock to trade. Unfortunately, I haven't been trading it, but that would have been the stock to trade the past week or so here. We did get the bank earnings in. Some of the bank earnings actually kind of surprised. So we're going to go through all of that. We're going to talk about the week ahead, everything that's, we got the PPI, which could tick up. We've got other events going on around the world. I know the World Economic Forum is meeting in Davos, Switzerland next week. And I do want to, not to get too political on this channel, but I do want to discuss the interview with Governor Greg Abbott from Texas that he was on CNN yesterday with Jake Tapper. And I wrote down some very important facts. We're going to get through that at some point in this video as well. But again, it's not to get political, but I'm just trying to think of this in sort of an economic, financial way. I'm trying to think of it in terms of, some of these decisions, how inflationary they're going to be for the U.S. economy. All right. So, and then we're going to talk about the potential perfect storm when it comes to recession, the earnings recession, are these monetary policies by the Fed, are they going after the consumer? And what is that going to do for demand? And how is that going to translate into earnings? So I think all of that is super important. So if you guys enjoy these videos, please give the video a like. Leave your thoughts down below. Follow me on Instagram at Millennial Trades. And let's go ahead and get into the bank earnings because that was the big thing today. First of all, we had the Treasury up slightly, not a lot. It was actually kind of quiet in the stock market, in the Treasury market. I think the data from yesterday, the CPI and these bank earnings, we just didn't see the huge explosive moves one way or the other that I think this market was anticipating. But going into the bank earnings, JP Morgan, they posted better than expected fourth quarter earnings. And Jamie Dimon says the U.S. economy remains strong. Take that for what it is. We have Bank of America reporting fourth quarter earnings that showed the bank's revenue benefited from higher interest rates. Wells Fargo, they also beat expectations. But then you have BlackRock. Their fourth quarter profits dropped by 23%. Whereas like with JP Morgan, I think I have it written down here somewhere. JP Morgan's profits were up 6%. Their revenue was up 18%. Bank of America's profits were up 2%. Their revenue was up 11%. So, not the doom and gloom destruction I think that people were worried about with these bank earnings. But still, we've got other corporate earnings coming out the rest of this month, really. But I guess it spells a little bit less uncertainty, less uncertainty than maybe what we were expecting going into 2023. It's still not good. If you look at just look at the Treasury curve. I'm looking at it right now. The yield ticked up on the 1 month, the 3 month. We've got this huge inversion here where nobody wants to hold on to this short-term debt. The yields are very high. On the shorter term bonds, not so much on the longer term bonds, but a little bit less uncertainty from these bank earnings. But again, we've got data coming out next week. Who knows what the PPI report is going to entail? In fact, we've got retail sales, producer price inflation, housing indicators, and earnings reports from several big corporations coming out next week. So the tide could change. And if you look at some of these charts, you look at a chart, I'm looking at the NASDAQ here, like we're right in this pretty major supply area that the NASDAQ just hasn't been able to break above this in, months, maybe a year or so now. Probably not a year, but look at a chart of the NASDAQ. It looks like it could go either way. If we get massive volume like we did yesterday and we can push above some of these supply areas, we'll be good. But it could just as easily contract. And I'm wondering if we get a relapse on inflation, which Jim Bullard said this week. I talked about this a couple of times now, but Jim Bullard says that's possible. We could see, because these things don't go down in straight lines. Why would inflation come down in a straight line? It probably won't. I think it's plausible to speculate that we will see inflation tick back up. Whether that's in the PPI numbers, whether that's in next month's CPI report, or the PCE inflation numbers. There's a lot of ways that this could go. Even if headline inflation starts looking okay, I mean, if the core inflation is still elevated or continues to uptick, this is going to spell much uncertainty. I don't want to say disaster, but much uncertainty. And this did happen in the 70s. Some say that the Fed is kind of taking the lessons learned from the 70s seriously, and they don't want to do too little and have inflation come back roaring past its peak of 9%, but they also don't want to do too much, stifling the economy completely. So, a lot of things to consider here. One can really only speculate. I mean, what else are you going to do? But those are we're out of the woods now with the CPI, at least for this month, and the bank earnings. We'll have to see what the PPI and the retail sales and the housing indicators and the earnings reports. We'll have to see how all this comes out next week. In currency news, right? Not much change in the dollar today. Dollar actually looked like it was going to have a pretty decent day, and then started to retract. Maybe based off some of the earnings information here from the banks, but there is a sort of a currency crisis going on in a couple of different places. Number one, Egypt. And I've got a few, details about this. Apparently, they switched with the IMF. They were just bailed out like $3 billion by the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. And we've been talking about them a lot too, because Georgina, I think is her name, is predicting 1/3 of the world falling into deep recession, and maybe America can escape hardcore recession. But she says 1/3 of the world is going to be deep in recession, and it looks like Egypt is having major currency problems. They needed a $3 billion bailout from the IMF, and the past year they've been facing a foreign currency shortage, which I guess that means they don't have enough dollars. They can't get enough dollars to pay for the things that they need. So Egypt's central bank moved to working with the IMF to a more flexible currency rate, whatever that means. I guess that means the IMF can sort of, pick the rate of exchange, whereas maybe other pairs, it's a little bit more based off of just natural supply and demand. So they're manipulating the absolute heck out of the Egyptian currency. It's down 35% and dropped another 5%. I think they dropped it 5% on purpose. They let it drop to 5% a couple of days ago. Could it depreciate further? That's the question. Are we going to see crazy riots in the streets of Egypt because these people can't buy food? They claim they need to ensure a supply-demand equilibrium, and that in the FX market, the foreign exchange markets, that this is imperative, that they had to have this bailout. Well, if you go to look into the IMF and where the IMF gets all of its money from, it gets like a majority of its contributions from the United States. And they get contributions from member quotas. Obviously, the United States is paying the most member quota here. Also, multilateral and bilateral borrowing agreements. When you go to try to figure out, well, how much money does the U.S. actually spend on the IMF, you got to cut through so much, crap. But so much, central bank speak, I guess, ghoul talk. But the U.S. quota, as of 5 years ago, this is what I've been able to figure out. And if you guys can find a more current number, please link it down below, because I couldn't find it. I researched this thing for like 2 hours last night. And by the way, the quotas are formulated based on your GDP. I guess it's the weight of 50% of the GDP of that country. Everything from economic variability, and internal reserves, international reserves. So there's several different ways they factor in this this quota, how much countries have to, to be a member of the IMF, how much they have to pay. But as of 5 years ago, The United States total was 477 billion. All right. Not the U.S. total. I'm sorry. The quotas 5 years ago totaled 477 billion. I would reckon to imagine that that's probably a lot higher, closer to $1 trillion in this day and age, because this is from 5 years ago. But back then, the United States contributed 83 billion. Obviously, that's the biggest chunk of the pie there. So my point is, in going through all of that with you guys here, is that we're essentially bailing out Egypt, bailing out their. I mean, because Egypt's bailout was $3 billion. I think this is back in December, maybe. But if you think 5 years ago the United States was contributing 83 billion, $3 billion, that's kind of a small fraction of what the United States contributes. So I would imagine the United States is the reason why the IMF has the money to bail out, Egypt. And we don't ever really think about this. I don't really think about it too much, but how inflationary is that when you have a sort of a centrally controlled international fund that the United States contributes the most to, right? But then they go out and bail, third world currencies, bail them out. How inflationary is that on the global economy, on the U.S. economy, on prices, on currencies? Something to think about. But, with the IMF, they have this 2023 forecast saying that, global GDP is steady at 2.7%, but that 1/3 of the world's going to go into deep recession. And they always come out with these forecasts. Whenever I hear that word forecast, I kind of think broadcast, casting spells, right? Witchcraft. Do these people actually know, what they're talking about, or is this just sort of some sort of Babylonian money magic they're playing on all of us? But Kristalina Georgieva from Bulgaria, the IMF head, she says there's still a lot of uncertainty, especially for smaller countries. And, we had a recent defense spending bill that, and this is crazy. This is going to blow your mind. But in our defense spending bills, for Ukraine, there was a mandate basically that included that the U.S. helped to pay Ukraine's debt to the International Monetary Fund. And why was this? Because the IMF is basically taking funds the United States sends to Ukraine and taking them into their own coffers. So it's called a supercharge policy. This is when countries are deep in debt to the IMF and they get charged these crazy interest rates. Well, the United States is supposed to pick up the slack. But we're trying to get some of that changed, apparently. Congress is trying to change some of these stipulations in the defense spending bills, I guess, that have already been passed. But just imagine that, right? The IMF, funds that are being sent to Ukraine to supposedly fight Russia are going into the coffers of the IMF. And the United States is supposed to be paying for this. It's our job to pay Ukraine's debt to the IMF. Absolutely scandalous. You guys can check this out for yourselves. There will be some links, as always, in the description box. So if you guys want to read up on some of these stories that I've been trying to keep track of here. Like I said, we are going to get to Greg Abbott and the whole border situation. There's a few things I want to talk about in there, but let's just get through the potential recession and some of the factors that we need to be looking for. First of all, if meme stocks like Bed Bath & Beyond are still working, right? If meme stocks are still strong and alive, to me it's like we're nowhere near actually pricking the bubble. If Bed Bath & Beyond can have these 30% gains in a day based off of just ridiculous news items, how far into this bubble pop are we really? It just doesn't make sense. If the bubble has been popped, these meme stocks wouldn't still be working. Bitcoin wouldn't still be working, for instance. So I think we, long term, I don't know if the bubble's been pricked yet. It's a perfect storm, for America especially. You think of, we have rent delinquencies and mortgage delinquencies that are starting to tick up a little bit here. Exploding consumer debt, exploding student loan debt. where are these guys going to get the jobs to pay back 30, 40, 50 grand, 100 grand? Then you have the sort of the wall of inflation with food, utilities, housing, transport. All of this is higher. And like cereal, for instance, is up 16%. Eggs are up 15% on the year. So you think about all of that, and then you think about the rising employment, and they've promised us rising unemployment. Not employment, rising unemployment. They promised us this. They want unemployment up at 5%. So what does America look like when the unemployment rate is at 5%, but you have exploding consumer debt, people that can't pay back these debts? You have mortgage and rent delinquencies. You've got higher and higher inflation on, where it actually counts. They always talk about, the core inflation is the most important. Well, to you and me, housing, food, energy, this is really where the inflation counts. So this is what they mean, I think, when they're talking about this earnings recession, that, the fact that the consumer is being hit so hard by all this restrictive monetary policy and also the long-lasting effects of the expansionary monetary policy from a few years ago. The fact that the consumer is being hit so hard by this is going to translate into lower corporate earnings. I suppose that's what they mean when they talk about the earnings recession. So the lower, economic levels, they're going to take this. They're going to take the hardest hit. But you also have the wealth effect with the higher income households. If they see their stock portfolios down 20, 30%, they're not going to feel as rich, so they're not going to spend as much money. And that is a real phenomenon. So if the consumers are getting hit, that is going to slow down these corporate earnings, right? And, is it time to correct these imbalances? It probably is, because we had, such ridiculous monetary policy and fiscal policy, irresponsible policies for so long. They're trying to reel some of this in now, but we need probably to have huge corrections, not only in the markets, not only with commodities, not only, with prices, but just the economy, finance in general. We have huge imbalances. So hopefully some of that can get fixed. In some other news real quick, JP Morgan, who has actually been ripped off by basically a fintech startup. It was for college financial planning, right? They're marketing it to college students. Well, Jamie Dimon spent $175 million acquiring this company in December, and apparently they forged like 40 million accounts. So the company wasn't worth nearly as much as they bought it for. And it's kind of like, well, how does JP Morgan, make this kind of mistake? How does a bank like JP Morgan not do their due diligence? But it happens to the best of them. We all make bad trades. I guess that's why I'm highlighting the story. JP Morgan also acquired Viva Wallet from Athens back in December as well. They've been making all kinds of acquisitions, but the reason I thought that one was interesting is because Jamie Dimon's grandfather supposedly was a Athenian banker, all right, maybe like 100 years ago or something. So obviously he still has connections to Greece. He claims to be Greek, and I always found that kind of interesting, suspicious, but interesting nonetheless. And I think JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, they're a little paranoid about all the rising fintech, this new emerging sector of finance. So they've been pouring billions of dollars the last decade into proprietary technology, and they've been buying up fintech. So they're making some good deals, but they're also making some deals where they're just getting straight ripped off, I think, just because they're in a hurry to try to catch up with all of that. And then, like I said, Jamie Dimon said the economy is strong, kind of going along with Kristalina Georgieva's comments from the IMF about how the United States will be able to skirt a major recession. All right, so we're going to get this done in under 25 minutes, I think. So that's pretty much it. We talked about what's coming up next week. We talked about the bank earnings. We talked about the markets. We talked about that heavy yield curve inversion. We talked about the perfect storm for America and the coming earnings recession potentially. And we talked about Egypt's currency crisis. We're bailing out Egypt. Oh, I forgot to mention Croatia. Prices in Croatia are up just days after they adopt the euro. So you can see why countries like the UK, as bad as their currency is, they don't want to adopt the euro, because as soon as they do, prices are going to double in their country too. So Greg Abbott. All right, I'm going to try to just keep this non-political. I just want to report to you what Greg Abbott told Jake Tapper. And Jake Tapper was trying to derail the conversation into his own political ideology, trying to promote his own propaganda. But Greg Abbott was, matter of fact, to the point, didn't get excited. With candidates like Trump, even like Ron DeSantis, sometimes they tend to get real animated and real excited, when they're being confronted. But Greg Abbott kept his cool. He says there are over 150 different countries that are sending, their poor masses across our border. I mean, just think about that. 150 different countries. So for Jake Tapper or any of the left mainstream media to claim that, all of these are failed socialist states, which is what Jake Tapper tried to say, that, most of these migrants are coming from failed socialist states. No, 150 different countries. I don't think so. He also says that, I said I wasn't going to keep it. I was going to keep it non-political. So let's really try to stick to that. I just get so aggravated talking about CNN and Jake Tapper. The cartels are moving huge volumes of people, all right, more than when Trump was in office. They're making many more apprehensions. They're having many more encounters than when Trump was in office. And the reason is not because Trump wasn't doing a good job and wasn't trying to apprehend, using Border Patrol to apprehend these people. It's because ever since Biden and Kamala Harris got elected, tens of thousands of more people are pouring across the border than ever before. So Greg Abbott claims that he's sent like 7 or 8 letters to the Biden administration asking for assistance, asking for cooperation, and they haven't responded to any of Abbott's letters. So he talks about the congressional powers and the presidential powers, what they have the authority to do and what they don't have the authority to do. And he laid it out pretty plain. I mean, it's all in, the Constitution. Jake Tapper didn't have any real arguments against this. I suppose Jake Tapper is aware loosely of what's, what congressional powers they actually do have, what authorities they actually have. But he says that Biden nor Congress have the authority to catch and release en masse all the people that they're releasing into the U.S. But that he also says Biden has the authority to forcibly remove people en masse. And nobody wants to talk about this because, the image is just it's so harsh to think about, ICE going door to door and getting rid of these people, forcibly removing them from their shanty towns or their houses where there's like 50 people living in there. It is kind of harsh to think about that. But Greg Abbott says Congress and the president have full authority to do so. And the longer they don't do it, the harder, the more extreme the measures are going to be when they do finally have to, break down and start removing people. He sent 8 letters to the Biden administration. Abbott says that we're being invaded. Right? This is what the governor of Texas is saying, is that we're being invaded. This is an invasion the United States really needs to deal with. Okay, and Jake Tapper tried spinning this, saying that Greg Abbott was mischaracterizing the people that were coming over here as enemy combatants and all this kind of stuff. And he kept his cool. He didn't argue with Jake Tapper. Jake Tapper has his opinions or whatever. And so he said, well, it's just a mischaracterization of what I'm saying. When I'm talking about invasion, the sheer volume of people, he said, if this is not an invasion, what is? They had to concede power of entire cities, like in El Paso, for instance, to a foreign population. He said that we didn't have the resources to deal with it. We couldn't police. we couldn't do anything. A foreign population showed up on our border, invaded our city, and we had to, concede entire city blocks to, foreign powers. I don't know if Jake Tapper just doesn't get it, or CNN just, I don't know. They've been interviewing more Republicans and stuff, and I guess trying to be a little bit more balanced ever since Chris Licht got in there. My father actually taught Chris Licht in graduate school, the new head of CNN. So hopefully they're trying to shake things up a little bit here. I don't think putting Don Lemon on the morning show with, Poppy Harlow is really shaking things up. But they did get rid of a few people. I think they got rid of that one guy that was jacking off on a Zoom call a couple of years ago. They tried bringing him back on. I don't even remember his name. But I think they did get rid of that guy. But to see Anderson Cooper still on primetime, Aaron Burnett crying every day about Trump. I'm not sure how much CNN or Chris Licht are really shaking things up here. But they are having more Republicans on. And they gave Greg Abbott a good 15 minutes. He says just that the volume of human beings and drugs, it's invading our country and it's destroying America. He went on to talk about the fentanyl, all of the drugs, and the criminals, the terrorists. They have apprehended, people on the FBI's most wanted watch list for terrorism. And it's like the Democrats, I still don't think they're quite ready to admit that we need to close the border. We're going to need a wall. We're going to need to remove people. We're going to need to, they always talk about background checks. How do you get a background check from somebody that's coming across an ocean from a country that doesn't even have public record? How do you do background checks on something like this? And with the sheer volume of, 20,000 people just in the streets of El Paso. But this is the kind of nonsense they try to convince us of. We just need more background checks. And by immigration reform, what they mean is they just want to legalize all this shit. To think entire cities have been taken over by foreign population. I mean, this is Greg Abbott. This isn't me. This is the governor of Texas talking about this. Shocking news to say the least. But you guys let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Do you think we'll ever get a solution to this immigration problem, or are we just going to be, constantly invaded by the global elite's army of orcs? And let me know what you think about the earnings recession. Are you feeling recessionary? Do you think America is starting to look like we're in a recession? Do they have ways to manipulate the data to try to convince us that we're not in a recession, even when we are? These questions I would love to know some answers to. So definitely leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, we appreciate your comments. The channel could always use more comments, especially with these algorithms and how hard it can be to get some visibility over here. Give the video a like as well. Follow me on Instagram at Millennial Trades. Obviously, subscribe to the channel. You can check this out on BitChute, Rumble, for everybody watching on those platforms. Thank you so much for supporting on the alternative tech websites. And with that, as always, until next time, I'll see you guys on the next video.